particularly those who have not had a chance to. We've got a stellar panel, and I very briefly will introduce them. If you look at the pink sheets that you've got in your file, you've got the background, just alphabetically as they appear in your program. First, to my left is Linda Bathgate, a good friend, and also, not incidentally, one of my editors. Linda is the communications editor, as many of you know, for Lawrence Earl Associates, headquartered up in Nawa, New Jersey, right on the border.
Yeah, we need
Just a little graphic, just a little.
We're trying to.
Just a little
get
something
some
on the
sort of
final
summary.
slide.
If you have an
Just on the
idea,
final slide.
it's got to
This
be
is-
sort of like, this is the last moment that they'll be encountering the slide, so.
The clip art is not available. Oh, well, here it is. Clip organizer. Clips online. Search all collections.
Oh, yeah.
Search. Here they are. This is how they do it.
I'm doing this one.
These are little. Well, I'm afraid if I have to be in this font. Great. Okay, let's save this.
Save
Let's see what
it.
it looks like. Save this. Okay, I'm gonna print it out again. I'll print out this version now.
Print out a couple of copies at least.
Let's see if I have to get all of these slides per page. Because it was conflicting. Exciting. Credits. In now. Neutron.
These and other. Under slide 2, which is the one with the 5 owners.
Will you be introducing that quote, or do we need to introduce that?
So Brad, you want someone else to read it since you're doing, you want to read it?
It'd be better if somebody else did. Let him focus on the slides. All right? And then at that point, we'll go on to slide 3, which is the problem. And it's the third bullet in slide 3 where the voices come up with the local problems. All right? Ready? I'll simply say, marketplace competition cannot serve all local, even though the word is not on the slide, local community needs. And as soon as I say that, 1, 2, 3.
Brad, can you put in local in slide 3, last sentence, the problem?
In the very last line, if you can put local and even put it in italics before the word community needs, that'd be great. It's not a must, but if you can. Okay, we're going to come up, we're going to start with the opening slide. Okay, the Center for Digital Democracy is pleased to be a part of this presentation. We feel that the FCC is caught in a classic conflict. Why don't you go to the problem? This is where we go. Oh, I see. All right. Where you got it? No. Yes. Can you reverse slide 2 and 3? The disco. With the disco. Oh, it's sitting right here. Do you have it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, we're getting nervous.
When we run through it one.
We're reversing slide 2 and 3. So this is going to change your cues a little bit. All right? So now the cue for the first voices is going to be a different set of voices. It's going to be the local voices are going to come up on the problem. The problem's going to be slide 2. The 5 companies is going to be slide 3. All right? Everybody with us?
Yes.
Okay, yep. All right. So let's go back to the problem. Just go back to slide 2. The problem. The FCC is faced with conflicting congressional and court decisions that are constricting its operations. Meanwhile, media consolidation is continuing. Yet what is increasingly obvious to us is that marketplace competition cannot serve all local community needs.
Hi, I'm from Provincetown, Massachusetts. In my community, we need more media coverage of issues related to alternative lifestyle and same-sex marriage?
Stand up.
Stand up, don't say hi, just say I'm from.
Village Montana teachers struck for 21 days
That's good.
for a 2.5% pay raise in a state that ranks 46th nationwide in teacher pay.
And in Athens, Ohio, the whole community's up in arms over strip mining and mountaintop removal.
As soon as he's done, go to slide 3. These 5 companies control the vast majority of what we see on television. As William Safire recently wrote in the New York Times,
In 1996, the 2 largest radio chains owned 115 stations. Today, 2 chains own more than 1,400.
there's a second quote there, isn't there? Is there just one quote? And then we go to our last slide. We've got all the quotes, right? We didn't miss anything in the way of quotes. And our last slide is, and I guess what I'll probably do is simply say this, as NTIA recently pointed out in some filing with the commission, as NTIA recently pointed out in a filing with the commission in this docket, it was this proceeding as far as you know. Diverse and local voices contributing to public discourse is a fundamental element of our democratic society.
Great.
He has that.
It's not crucial, it's difficult, as they said, I mean, we can simply say as they said in a recent filing with the commission.
What did you need?
We were just trying to pin down whether the NTIA quote was filed in this proceeding.
We'll go keep it. I just have the precise quote.
It's not crucial.
Okay.
It's not crucial, don't worry about
But
it.
so far it was about 7 minutes if I,
That's fine.
8 minutes,
That's-
but
that's
it's
good.
Did it 4:54 right now?
Well, democracy appreciates the chance to offer some of its ideas to the FCC. We do represent a multiplicity of points of view, despite the fact that 2 people are sitting here at the moment. We speak to the general public interest of America's listeners and viewers. The problem that the Commission is facing is one of conflicting requirements, congressional requirements from the 1996 Act, and extremely difficult court findings in Fox versus Sinclair rulings that have placed the Commission in an almost untenable position. Meantime, the trend to media consolidation continues apace. CDD feels very strongly that marketplace competition alone cannot serve widely varied local community needs.
I'm from Provincetown, Massachusetts, and my community needs more media programming and coverage of alternate lifestyles and same-sex marriages.
Billings, Montana teachers struck for 21 days for a 2.5% pay raise in a state that ranks 46th nationally in teachers' pay.
And in Athens, Ohio, the whole community is up in arms over strip mining and mountaintop removal.
There are many ways to define who controls what. One example is on the screen before you. As William Safire recently wrote in the New York Times,
In 1996, the 2 largest radio chains owned 115 stations. Today, 2 chains own more than 1,400.
task 1 for the Commission is to define the relevant terms. Voice is obviously one of them, and we would argue, perhaps to the surprise of some of the audience, that voice at the moment should be limited to broadcasting stations, multiple channel providers such as cable and DDS, certainly newspapers and magazines, but not yet internet websites, despite our name. With few exceptions, individual websites have a very limited impact. They're not at all comparable yet to truly mass media. Necessity is clearly a central term to the most recent court rulings, as was recently well analyzed in Stuart Shorenstein's law review article that suggests the issue is being turned on its head. Most importantly, we feel that these terms, as well as others, should best be locally defined. As Fordham University's Philip Napoli argued,
marketplace incentives do not effectively motivate the provision of public affairs programming, especially in terms of locally produced programming.
our suggested approach to this conundrum is what we dub the community dividend. Essentially, regardless of what may happen with the specific local ownership rules, we're restricting our comments in our brief few minutes to the local rules as opposed to the national rules. We propose that the FCC establish a policy that as local market concentration increases, each owner of multiple outlets would be required to provide opportunities to create time and or channels for the expression of diverse points of view. This is a very general principle. Keep in mind several things. We are interested in CBD in those who shout and those who whisper and feel that all should be heard. We would argue that decisions should be made by a local entity as to who would speak, when, how much. We would argue that what we're proposing is loosely based on the cable pay channel principle, public, educational, governmental channels. And to some degree, on a multiplicity of internet channels is suggesting the same idea. We would also suggest that the local community definition here is important, and we would argue that perhaps one good way to do that is to use the industry's own definition, specifically ADI, area of dominant influence, a principle used by ratings firms. Now, there are, of course, differences with radio, television, and cable, let alone media the Commission does not regulate, and it will be necessary to work that out. We would propose that the Commission put together a task force. We'd be happy to be part of that task force. That perhaps over a 90-day period would develop a scheme to be put out for public comment that would begin to pin this entire process down. We propose removing the FCC from the horns of a dilemma. We argue that a national definition trying to do the same thing for everyone across the country does not work. And there are a variety of legal precedents in related areas that suggest this is true. We recognize the economic impetus that is driving consolidation and will continue to drive consolidation, regardless of what happens with the specific rules and question. Therefore, CDD proposes, as we put it, a community dividend, if you will, a parallel process, a parallel proceeding to the consideration of the specific rules and regulations before us. As NTIA put it in a filing with the Federal Communications Commission, diverse and local voices contributing to public discourse is a fundamental element of our democratic society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, CDC. Commissioners, your question.
Christopher, what are the costs, or have you studied the costs of having all these local meetings between the large corporations, the local owners, and the community members?
It's not what we're suggesting, Commissioner, and I should have made that clear. What we have in mind is that a local entity be created. It might start with a local political entity, the city council, the common council of a community, that would help to set up, much like the public entities that run many public television stations often put together for that very specific purpose. That they then would work, none of this has been worked out in detail, that they would then work with local owners. And what we're arguing specifically is that multiple channel owners within a market, not individual owners of individual channels, that multiple owners of channels within a market would fall under this notion of the dividend that we're speaking to.
So there's an additional layer of administration and administrative
But
costs.
it's local, and we're arguing that it should be local, it should not be Washington. It
Paid
should
by
not be
local-
the federal.
Paid by local taxpayers.
To the degree that tax support would be needed, we think once this process is set up, It need not cost much.
Would you put a limit on the number of stations locally that any one television operator can own?
The preference of CDD is, if you will, no more than 50%, and I mean that in two senses. The number of outlets, we feel that very strongly, and secondly, the proportion of advertising revenue in that medium. We would feel that no single owner should have more than half in either case.
Now, you would put a public access type of obligation upon these TV operators who own 2, 3, 4 stations in the market.
Also radio, sir.
Also radio.
Yes.
Whereas in the cable sense, where there is a public access obligation, you have 1, 2, 3, 400 channels available. How would you rationalize the difference, and how would you rationalize making this a requirement upon free over-the-air television?
What I think the task force that we're suggesting the commission establish needs to look at is, if you will, an escalating scale of time or channels, so that as more ownership, this is the crucial point in what we're proposing, as an individual unit owns more media within a given local market, so too would its requirement to provide access increase.
So you would freeze the current levels and look at future acquisitions for this definition, or would you apply it to the current marketplace as it exists?
We would apply to the current marketplace to the degree that we are talking about multiple owners or owners of multiple units within a given market.
When you suggested that one owner could own 50% of the media in a market,
No more than.
no more than 50%, if that owner was only a television station owner, does that mean that in a market of 8 television stations, one owner could own 4 television stations?
We're arguing as a principle it should be no more than that. I think, to put it mildly, many of our members would be extremely uncomfortable with that level of concentration. I'm giving you a general principle.
Sure, I appreciate that. The other, and on the, going back to the voices, too, you said that newspapers and magazines should be included, but then also said that they should only be local voices. What would you do with A, national newspapers, national daily newspapers, and B, weekly magazines, which are not currently subject to any of the ownership voice counts?
Right, we understand the print media are obviously not, but we think they should be counted in the notion when you're looking at multiple ownership. We're simply arguing, in a sense, a very black and white process. One, we would argue that traditional mass media, be they local or be they national, should count, quote unquote. That the internet at this point, individual websites, should not count, because we do not feel they have risen to a threshold of comparability with any of the more traditional media we're talking about.
If a cable TV system in that market were to buy one television station, would you apply your test as well?
Yes.
Thank you.